My cat got pregnant. I meant to go after the pet boarding shop but accidentally sent the message to my boss. Are you really not going to take responsibility for this pregnancy? I'm so miserable I can't sleep, and I cry every night from the pain. Staring at the frantic, misdirected messages I'd sent late at night, I was so scared I wrote up my resignation letter on the spot. The next day at work, my usually stone-faced boss cautiously lowered his head in front of me. That night, I swear I was just trying to sneak a kiss. Ever since realizing I'd texted the wrong person, I barely slept a wink. In the morning, I grabbed a leftover cold bun from the fridge, stuffed it in my mouth, and left. I clocked in like my hair was on fire, then bolted straight for the bathroom to throw up. My stomach was churning violently. The bun had gone bad. I wiped my mouth and came out, turning to see a coworker. She teased loudly, "Don't tell me our secretary Richard is pregnant." I practically had a panic attack at the word pregnant. I spun around and saw Tim, who had just arrived at the office, standing right behind me. I quickly waved my hands in denial. "Not pregnant. I'm just not feeling well." Tim walked over, looking me up and down. "You look pale as a ghost. If you're not feeling well, take the day off. I don't have a habit of working my employees to death." I carefully studied his expression, trying to read something, anything. Tim and I went to the same college. Calling him the Ice Prince of campus was a generous way of putting it. Tim had a foul mouth and a permanent scowl, something I learned on my very first day. After my messaging disaster last night, I was so terrified I'd already drafted my resignation. Tim didn't seem any different than usual. I tested the waters. "Tim, are you busy today?" He looked at me like I was an idiot. "If I'm not busy, you all starve." Once we were in the office, I glanced at his computer and saw notifications exploding from hundreds of work chats. My chat icon was buried so deep it was probably in the digital abyss. He probably didn't see it. I breathed a sigh of relief. "Tim, I'd like to take the afternoon off." Tim glanced at me and asked, "What for?" "I have to go to the hospital for something." Tim approved my time off. I raced against the clock to get to the hospital. I really hadn't been feeling well lately, and with a small break coming up, it was a good time to get it sorted out. The hospital was quick with the diagnosis. Confirmed appendicitis, surgery recommended. This lowly office worker had to request more time off. "Tim, I need to have surgery and stay in the hospital. I'll need to take 2 more sick days." Tim quickly replied with an okay. Relieved, I put down my phone and was wheeled into the operating room. But the moment I set my phone down, the calls started coming in, one after another. My screen was flooded with replies from Tim. "Richard, what did you mean by what you wrote earlier? Was that morning sickness? Is it really bad? I'm sorry. I was drunk that night. I swear I was just trying to sneak a kiss. I'm not trying to dodge responsibility. I was just afraid that if I brought it up out of the blue, you wouldn't be able to handle it. By the way, you went to the hospital. When you asked if I was busy this morning, did you want me to go with you? You said you're having an operation. What kind of surgery can you have while you're pregnant? Richard, are you so disappointed in me that you're going to get rid of the baby? Please, I'm begging you, just answer me." When I came out of the operating room, I was completely drained. My phone was buzzing non-stop on the side table. Annoyed, I picked it up, assuming it was my taskmaster boss, Tim, assigning me more work. But when I looked, I saw our small private work chat had blown up. The group, usually dead quiet, now had 99+ notifications. A few coworkers had created a small private chat, and now they were all gossiping frantically under pseudonyms. LMAO, I've never seen Tim look so terrifying. He looks like he's about to eat someone. What did Richard do to piss him off this badly? Speaking of, has anyone found Richard yet? Just found her address. He's probably on his way to her house right now to kill her. Seeing those messages made my whole body go numb. I racked my brain for any trouble I might have caused recently. I'd swiped a fancy pen from Tim. I'd killed a few of his fish. But the list of my crimes didn't seem to warrant this level of fury. Hesitantly, I looked at the dozens of missed calls from Tim and dialed him back. My voice was weak, barely alive. "Tim, did you need something?" On the other end, Tim's breathing was heavy. If I listened closely, I could hear the muffled sound of someone who had been crying. His voice was strange. "Richard, where are you?" I answered truthfully, "The hospital." "The surgery is over, right?" I mumbled a yeah. "It's done. It was just a minor procedure, Tim. Nothing to worry about." Tim went silent. I thought maybe he'd forgotten to hang up. Then, he let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. "In your eyes, this was just a minor procedure?" I blinked, staring blankly at the incision on my abdomen. Is appendicitis supposed to be some kind of terminal illness? Are my co-workers going to start a collection for me? Before my mind could spiral any further, he hung up. I put my phone down, and the group chat, which had been quiet for a few minutes, started blowing up again. "Big news, Tim just bought a burial plot for a sky-high price." "What? Who in the family is in trouble?" "Haven't heard anything. If something happened to the family, there's no way the news wouldn't have leaked." "I heard Tim's younger brother is back in the country. Could someone be on their deathbed, so even he had to come back for a final goodbye?" The chat was a storm of speculation. I clutched my phone, quietly soaking up the gossip. I didn't snap out of it until the door to my hospital room was pushed open. The man himself, the subject of all the rumors, was now standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me in silence. I guiltily put my phone down and asked, "Tim, what brings you here?" It had been raining this afternoon. Tim had a damp chill about him, as if he'd been in such a rush that he hadn't even bothered with an umbrella when he got out of the car. He sat by my bed, looking at me without a word. As he watched me, his eyes slowly reddened, and he lowered his head, whispering, "I'm so sorry, this is all my fault." I quickly waved my hands. "It's not that serious. It was just a small operation." With some effort, I lifted my hospital gown to show him the incision on my stomach. The moment Tim saw the cut, tears streamed down his face. Hot tears hit the back of my hand, slowly turning cold. Tim bent down, half kneeling beside my bed. "I'm sorry, Richard, I'm so sorry." When Tim started crying, I felt like crying too. I never thought that the stone-cold boss was actually such a caring employer. This was the first time I'd ever seen Tim cry. We were alumni, and he was 2 years ahead of me. I only got to know Tim because of his younger brother, Caleb. When I was dating Caleb, he took me to meet his brother. Tim did not give off a friendly vibe. One cool, indifferent glance from him was enough to make me hold my breath. Caleb secretly told me later to steer clear of Tim, that he was bad news. In my junior year, Caleb got into a huge fight. To sweep it under the rug, the family decided to send him abroad immediately. When Caleb left, he asked me to wait for him. I ignored him and broke up with him on the spot. Caleb was a rich kid who would thrive abroad and do even better when he returned. Once we were out of school, we were from 2 different worlds, destined never to cross paths again. I thought we'd go our separate ways for good, but the bad news brother sought me out himself. "I've worked with you for a bit and I think you're very capable. Want to come try working for me?" The moment Tim called me, it felt like my world lit up. Even though Tim had a sharp tongue, he was pretty decent otherwise. If he wasn't, I wouldn't have stuck around, grumbling, for 5 years. Tim's fingertips hovered over the incision on my abdomen for a moment before he quickly pulled his hand away, as if afraid of hurting me. "It's all my fault. I'll make it up to you." Looking into Tim's red-rimmed eyes, I started to get bold. With the courage of someone facing a firing squad, I asked, "Does this mean you won't dock my pay for perfect attendance this month?" Tim looked at me and laughed. A laugh that made the tears in his eyes fall, tinged with an unspeakable bitterness. "In your eyes, is that all our connection is worth?" Tim didn't tell me yes or no. Like a deflated balloon, I didn't have the guts to ask a second time. Tim was a man of few words, but he came to the hospital to see me whenever he had a spare moment. He was even the one who picked me up on the day I was discharged. It wasn't until Tim had helped me upstairs, tied on an apron, and started cooking in my kitchen that I realized something was very wrong. "You're out of the hospital, but you still can't move around easily. I'll stay with you for a while. Once you've fully recovered, I'll feel better." Tim talked to himself as he worked with his back to me. In no time, he had prepared a 4-course meal. He didn't forget to put out food for my fat cat either. Tim forced a smile, saying in a self-deprecating way, "Just think of it as the boss looking out for his employee." Tim was being so nice it was making me panic. Especially when I saw him refilling the cat food, a wave of guilt washed over me. But living together did present more opportunities. While Tim was in the shower, I snuck over and grabbed his phone. I wanted to delete the mistaken message I'd sent that night, but the screen was unlocked to his browser history. Can A&C at 5 months pregnant lead to a hysterectomy? Post-miscarriage recovery diet for women. Can you really put a broken mirror back together? How to convince family to exile younger brother. When is a man most sexy? The search history was a chaotic mess. I covered my mouth in shock. Before I could process it, the bathroom door opened. I quickly put the phone down, pretending nothing had happened. I stammered, "I only have one bedroom." Tim grunted in acknowledgement and started laying out a mat at the foot of the bed. "I'll just sleep on the floor." Not only was my boss personally taking care of me, but he was also sleeping on the floor at night. My conscience was screaming. I wanted to tell him to just sleep in the bed with me, since it was big enough. Or I could take the floor and he could have the bed. I hesitated all night, not knowing how to bring it up, when suddenly the space next to me sank down. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. The room was so quiet I could hear Tim's every breath. A hot hand landed on my lower abdomen, stroking it gently. Tim's voice was soft, almost a whisper to himself, but it carried a dark, obsessive undertone. "Richard, I won't let you down again. Even if that idiot Caleb comes back, he can't take you from me." I was suddenly grateful it was dark, so Tim couldn't see my bewildered expression. Was he even speaking English? I didn't understand a word he was saying. I suddenly remembered Tim's strange behavior over the past few days. During my hospital stay, he had all my meals delivered from a hotel. Pigeon soup, pork knuckle soup, cushion carp soup. I ate so much I felt like I could start lactating. Tonight after dinner, Tim even made me a brown sugar dessert. This wasn't some boss caring for his employee. This was a full-blown postpartum recovery menu. I kept my eyes shut tight, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I didn't let out a breath until Tim went back to his spot on the floor. I quickly pulled the covers over my head and yanked my phone out from under the pillow. The few days off had been so relaxing I'd almost forgotten my place as a corporate drone. I exited my game and opened the work app one hadn't touched in days. Below a mountain of work groups were dozens of unread messages from Tim. "Richard, please don't get rid of the baby, okay? I promise I'll be a very good husband and a very good father. I don't remember what happened after that night. I thought I just kissed you. I never thought I would cause you so much pain. I never, ever wanted to do anything to hurt you." I read through them carefully, and after a moment of recollection, I pieced together which that night he was talking about. 5 months ago, Tim and I were on a business trip. The place we went to was grim, and the hotel was terrible. It was the peak of summer. The air conditioner in my room was broken. I'd asked the front desk during the day, but they said they were fully booked and couldn't switch my room. That night, after a work dinner, I helped a drunk Tim back to his room. The second I felt the cool air from his A or C, I didn't want to leave. I told myself I'd just enjoy it for half an hour and then go back to my own room. Since Tim was passed out drunk, he'd never know. But I closed my eyes and didn't wake up until morning. Half asleep during the night, I must have thought I was at home because I'd taken off my blouse and slept in my camisole. The next morning, I opened my eyes to find myself staring into Tim's, who had clearly been awake for a while. His expression was unreadable. I scrambled up, instinctively lying. "You were really drunk last night, boss. You wouldn't let me leave, and I was so tired I must have just fallen asleep." Tim stared at my wrinkled blouse, crumpled on the floor, and asked hesitantly, "Did I do anything?" I shook my head like a bobblehead. "Nope, nothing at all." Luckily, that was the last day of our trip. Tim wasn't one to dwell on things, and he never mentioned that night again after we got back. I thought the incident was over. When I got back, I picked up my cat from the pet boarding shop and noticed its belly was getting bigger and bigger. I thought it was pregnant. I took it to the vet, who told me that no matter how big a male cat's belly gets, it can't be pregnant, for the same reason a man can't have a baby. I went home and checked the security footage, only to discover my cat had been prying open the freeze-dried treat container and feasting every night. I exited the chat, staring at the words appendicitis gleaming on the digital medical report, and fell into deep thought. Tim got up very early to cook. When I woke up, the table was half covered with 7 or 8 different kinds of pastries. He came out of the kitchen. The hands that usually held a pen or typed on a keyboard were now holding a plate. Every bite I took felt like a stab of guilt. I slowly put down my chopsticks and said, "I feel like I'm pretty much recovered. I can go back to the office tomorrow. You don't have to trouble yourself with taking care of me anymore, boss." Tim didn't answer, just placed a shrimp dumpling in my bowl. "Just eat." Before Tim left, he reminded me, "It's cold today. Don't go out, and don't touch cold water. I've called for a cleaning service. They'll be here soon, so you don't need to tidy up." Only after he was sure I'd heard him did he say goodbye. The second he was out the door, I was pacing around the apartment in a panic. Right now, I truly wished I had actually gotten pregnant with his child. Tim had bought a burial plot. I heard he was planning to hire someone to pick a good name for the child to be engraved on the tombstone. What if he goes to the hospital to ask for the remains for burial, and the doctor hands him my surgically removed appendix with a complicated look on their face? I couldn't even bear to think about what would happen next. Under these circumstances, you could kill me, but I wouldn't dare tell the truth. My phone suddenly buzzed. I picked it up and saw it was the workgroup chat. "We're short-staffed at the branch office. Anyone interested in transferring?" My eyes lit up when I saw the message. I immediately sent a private message saying I was interested and filled out the application form. I got up and drove to the office, planning to pack my things and report to the branch office as soon as possible. When I got off the elevator and pushed open my office door, I saw Tim sitting at my desk. He was holding a printed copy of the transfer application, with my name at the very top. Tim sat with his legs crossed, looking up at me. "Secretary Richard, you know to tell me when you're taking sick leave, but you don't bother to mention a major decision like a transfer." Seeing that application in his hand made my scalp tingle. I stammered for a while before coming up with a lame excuse. "Sorry, Tim, I forgot." Tim closed his eyes and sighed. "Why do you want to transfer so far away?" I answered in a small voice, "It's closer to my hometown." Tim laughed. "Closer to Caleb, you mean?" I almost forgot, Caleb was back. Caleb was competitive. He would never willingly be controlled by anyone. The family wasn't stupid enough to let 2 sons fight each other under the same roof. The best solution was to separate them. Thinking about it, the person in charge of the branch office was probably Caleb. The office door was pushed open again. Caleb's lazy voice drifted in. "You kept us apart for 5 years. I just want to make up for that lost time. Being a little closer is hardly enough, is it?" Caleb's arm rested on my shoulder, just as casually arrogant as he'd always been. I turned to look at him and noticed he seemed a bit taller, the boyishness completely gone. Tim looked up at him and said mockingly, "You were busy with a girl on each arm for 5 years abroad. Which one are you trying to make it up to? Do you even have the time?" Caleb looked guilty and glanced at me. I wasn't surprised. When I was little, my parents said they were moving away for work and then just disappeared without a trace. My grandmother raised me. In my sophomore year of high school, my grandmother also passed away from an illness. I had no family background to speak of, only a decent-looking face. I had no connection with Caleb before. If he hadn't been attracted to my looks, we never would have gotten involved. He could fall for me at first sight, and he could do the same with others. I knew from the beginning what would happen during his years abroad. Caleb looked like his buttons had been pushed, and he threw all the blame onto Tim. If you hadn't set me up and found an excuse to send me away, Richard and I would never have been separated for 5 years. Tim stared at him calmly, then a smile touched his lips. Then why didn't you just die abroad? If you hadn't come back, maybe Richard wouldn't have gotten rid of our child. Caleb's angry expression froze on his face, and he tilted his head in confusion. Child? Tim seemed lost in some dramatic scene he'd imagined. You must be pretty pleased with yourself, seeing her still hung up on you, right? It suddenly dawned on me that the day I had my surgery was the same day Caleb returned to the country. Fearing Tim would say something even more outrageous, I rushed over to stand between them. It has nothing to do with him. Let's not fight. Caleb looked down at me, then up at the slightly hurt-looking Tim. After a moment's thought, he pieced it all together, his expression becoming indescribably complex. He stared at Tim with pity, the mockery in his voice impossible to hide. Bro, you really have no idea what a woman is like after she's been intimate with someone. Tim looked like a defeated ex-husband. Finally, in a fit of anger and embarrassment, he called security to throw Caleb out. Right in front of me, Tim tore the application form to shreds. Richard, I won't stop you from pursuing a better life, but only if your choice is genuinely the right one. And clearly, Caleb is not a good match. He threw the shredded paper into the trash, then came over to me, his tone as gentle as it was when he left that morning. Go home and rest. I'll have the driver take you. On the way home, my mind was in turmoil. Caleb, being the jerk he is, sent me a message. The very first line sent me into a full-blown panic. I looked up your information at the hospital. It was immediately followed by a photo of a medical record. I could count on one hand the number of times I'd been to the hospital in my life. The only time I'd had surgery was for this appendectomy. I immediately surrendered. Dude, we broke up peacefully. I'm begging you, leave me alone. When Caleb and I were dating, we had a good relationship. The only time we ever fought was when he was leaving and asked me to wait for him. I didn't want to lie to him only to turn around and betray his trust. That day at the airport, I looked at the vibrant and ambitious Caleb before me and said, you'll meet someone you like abroad, and I'll live my life here. If we're meant to be, we'll see each other again when you get back. I had put it as gently as I could. If it weren't for Tim, we would never have seen each other again. I had no family to rely on. I settled wherever I could survive. I knew from the very beginning that I was different from this carefree young master who didn't know the hardships of the world. I didn't even have a place to rest my feet, so how could I possibly wait for anyone? The moment he left, I deleted his contact information. Now, staring at the unsaved number on my phone, I knew without a doubt it was Caleb. He sent an address. I'll wait for you here. Let's talk in person. I rushed to the designated coffee shop with a dark expression. Caleb was sitting by the window, folding the medical report into a paper airplane and tossing it around. I pushed open the door, grabbed the paper airplane, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it in the trash. What do you want? Caleb looked at the paper ball in the trash, was silent for a moment, then pulled a brand new copy of the medical report from his bag. I made a lot of copies. Wanna play again? I almost laughed out of anger. In that moment, it was like nothing had changed. Caleb was still the same. Seeing that I was genuinely angry, Caleb wisely stopped messing around. I really do have something important to discuss with you. 2 choices. You come to the branch office and be my secretary, and I'll double your salary. Or, I send this report to Tim right now. What happens to you then will have nothing to do with me. Caleb's words completely deflated my anger. He said slowly, "Tim and I don't share the same mother. His mother died of an illness. My mother was the other woman who married in. She was gone by the time I was 5, and my dad was gone by the time I was 7. All accidental deaths, and all happened on the anniversary of Tim's mother's death. Quite a coincidence, isn't it? Guess who will die on his mother's death anniversary this year?" Caleb's tone was light, as if he were telling a joke. It was warm in the coffee shop, but I felt my hands and feet turn cold. I never intended to lie to Tim. It's just that by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. After Tim had been taking care of me like a nanny for 2 weeks, if I told him it was all a misunderstanding, it would be a testament to his good temper if he didn't smash my apartment to pieces. Who would hire someone as their secretary who infuriated them at first glance? I could already picture myself being fired, clutching a box of my pathetic office belongings. If Tim wanted to make it impossible for me to find a place in this city, it would only take a single word from him. Caleb rested his chin on his hand and smiled at me. "Is it a tough choice? I thought someone like you, who only has eyes for money, would decide quickly." His fingertips tapped impatiently on the medical report, making me anxious. I had no choice. I snatched the report from his hand and said, as if accepting my fate, "I'll go to the branch office with you." Caleb got what he wanted. He leaned in, wrapped his arms around my shoulders, and pulled me into a hug. "Then I'll be waiting for Secretary Richard to join me. For old time's sake, I'll be sure to treat you well." Caleb bit out those last few words, his voice filled with hatred. The truth is, for the past 5 years, I'd been intermittently receiving harassing texts from a foreign number. At first, they mimicked spam ads. When I repeatedly didn't reply and blocked the number, the tone from the other side grew hostile. "Where are you scamming people for money these days? Is it lucrative? Got a boyfriend? Does he know what a heartless person you are? I see you signed for the dress I bought you. Put it on and send me a picture." I saw one, I blocked one. It didn't take a genius to know these were from Caleb. I wasn't sure how much affection he had for me. But I was crystal clear on the fact that he hated me for not waiting for him. It was no surprise that he was looking for a chance to get revenge. Caleb held me for a long time without letting go, saying nothing. It was only after a while that I sensed something was wrong. I turned to look out the window. Through the glass, my eyes met Tim's. He stood there, looking down from above, watching me embraced by Caleb. Tim pushed open the coffee shop door and walked in. He grabbed my hand and pulled me out of Caleb's arms. Caleb shrugged. "You're not getting angry, are you?" Richard didn't even struggle. Tim held me in his arms. I could even smell the cold, sharp scent on him. Tim spoke quietly, "I saw. Otherwise, I'd be reminding you to be more careful when you drive." Caleb's expression turned ugly, his usual carefree demeanor completely gone. Tim turned and led me outside. This was the first time I had ever been this close to Tim. He drove me home, his face grim and silent the whole way. I sat in the passenger seat, wishing I could become invisible. I tried to explain, placatingly, that coffee shop was having a promotion. I was going to buy a couple of drinks to bring back, but I ran into Caleb by chance. It was the best excuse I could come up with. Tim let out a long sigh and spoke hesitantly. "He said a lot of bad things about me, didn't he? After my dad brought him home, he was constantly trying to get rid of me, the outsider. He said my mom was a vengeful ghost and I was a jinx, that anyone who got close to me wouldn't live long. Because of that, everyone avoided me. I was always alone and never really learned how to get along with people." Tim paused, glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. It seemed like he had a lot more to say, but in the end, he swallowed it all and silently parked the car. "We're home. Let's go up and eat. I made you soup." Tim didn't ask another question about what happened at the coffee shop. When it was time to sleep, this tall man curled up on the mat at the foot of the bed. I stared at his back, unable to fall asleep. I could understand how Tim felt. I had also been alone for most of my life. Kids without parents around always seem to be a step below the others at school. When my grandmother came to parent-teacher conferences, there was always some smart-mouthed kid who would ask maliciously, "Richard, is that your mom?" The phrase "don't play with the kid who has no mom or dad" was repeated by different classmates every day, as if it were a concept drilled into everyone. But I was a good kid. After my grandmother passed away, the only way I could forget the suffocating loneliness was to keep myself busy. To have a new life enter a life like that would be enough to make anyone ecstatic. Yet for Tim, the time between knowing and losing was just a few hours. While I was lost in thought, Tim was already up. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Just like the past few nights, he quietly lay down beside me. Tim gently tugged on the hem of my shirt, his voice filled with sorrow. "Richard, don't leave me." I woke up at the crack of dawn. Tim's eyes were shut tight. He was still asleep. I glanced at my phone. It was flooded with urgent messages from Caleb. "I'm going to get Tim out of the way today. I'll have a driver pick you up downstairs. 10 a.m. sharp. If you're 1 minute late, I'm telling Tim the truth immediately." I frowned in annoyance and, without a second thought, booked a train ticket out of town. I'm not an idiot. Caleb hated my guts right now. Who knows if I'd even live to collect that double salary. I'm not desperate enough to trade my life for money. I packed a bag with essentials and stuffed my groggy little cat into its carrier. Once everything was ready, I remembered I still needed my ID. It was in the nightstand in my bedroom. I quietly pushed open the bedroom door and saw Tim was still sleeping. But his position had changed. He was lying flat on his back, hands placed neatly on his chest, sleeping peacefully, as if he'd been deliberately posed. I walked to the nightstand and saw 2 empty bottles of sleeping pills lying there. I almost screamed. I quickly turned to look at Tim. I never kept that kind of medicine in my house, and no one would take that much at once. I shook the man on the bed forcefully. "Tim. Tim." Tim slowly opened his eyes, his gaze perfectly clear. He had obviously been awake for a while. I grabbed my phone to call for an ambulance. "We're going to the hospital. I'm taking you to get your stomach pumped." Tim reached out, took my phone, and tossed it aside. He then asked me, "You're not leaving anymore?" I was so frantic I forgot everything else. All I could think about was calling for help, not letting Tim die. I tried to grab my phone, but Tim pulled me by the waist, pressing me down beside him. "If you call an ambulance, you'll miss your train." I stared at him, stunned. "How did you know?" Tim dodged the question. "Leave, or watch me die. Pick one." I was about to lose my mind. "You're threatening me with your own life?" It was a hopelessly stupid tactic, but it worked on me. I truly didn't dare to leave. Back then, between Caleb and freedom, you chose freedom. Later, between Caleb and me, you chose Caleb. Now, it's all laid out for you. Caleb, freedom, Maine. Which one do you choose? Looking at Tim's unnaturally pale face, I clenched my jaw in frustration and threw down the backpack I had packed for my escape. "I choose you. I'll save you." The ambulance arrived quickly. Tim was inside getting his stomach pumped while I waited outside. It was well past 10 o'clock, and Caleb had nearly blown up Tim's phone with calls. My phone was also flooded with messages from Caleb. Caleb sent Tim a picture. It was my medical record. Thank God I knew Tim's phone password. I deleted it all, like an ostrich burying its head in the sand, but the heavy feeling in my heart wouldn't go away. Caleb had a mouth. Sooner or later, he would expose the truth to Tim's face. Tim got to the hospital in time. After having his stomach pumped and being observed for 2 days, he was able to be discharged. On the way home, Tim seemed to be in a very good mood. "Richard, why did you choose me?" I secretly rolled my eyes. Besides being afraid you'd die, what other reason could there be? But obviously, I couldn't say that right now. I reached out and hooked a finger around the sleeve of his shirt. "Because I couldn't bear to leave you." I want to have another baby with you. I leaned in and kissed him, not forgetting to turn off the light. Clothes fell to the side of the bed, piece by piece, and Tim's breathing grew heavier. After about 15 minutes of fumbling, Tim seemed to completely deflate. Don't hide under the covers and cry. I sniffled and said quietly, I'm crying because I'm shy. Tim got up, turned on the light, and pulled me out from under the covers with a grave expression. So, how exactly did you get pregnant that night? I played dumb, looking at him with clear, innocent eyes. We slept next to each other. My grandma told me boys and girls can't sleep together, or they'll get pregnant. Your grandma didn't tell you anything else? I shook my head. Tim lit a cigarette. What kind of surgery did you have at the hospital? I forgot. I just remember it hurt a lot. The room fell silent again. I tentatively asked, Are you going to fire me? Tim's expression was a little strange. Is that what you've been worried about this whole time? He picked up his phone and showed me our chat history. Did you miss a sentence? You idiot. I kissed you because I like you. Tim's epilogue. I kept my feelings for Richard a secret from everyone for 5 years. After I sent Caleb away and got Richard to work for me, I thought things between us would move quickly. But before I could make a move, a male colleague at the company beat me to it. I watched from a corner, gritting my teeth, planning to fire the guy the next day for the crime of entering the office with his left foot first. Just as I was worrying, I heard Richard's rejection. Sorry, I'm not looking to date someone from the office. If we break up, it's too awkward seeing each other every day. Hearing that, my heart sank. She was worried about seeing him again when they worked on different floors. If I, who had to see her every single day, confessed, wouldn't she hate me even more? I immediately canceled the dinner reservation I'd made. I quickly suppressed the urge to drive her home myself. Terrified that Richard would see through me, I rarely even smiled in front of her. Having a secret crush is torture. You're scared she'll find out, but also scared she'll never know. Every day, I lived in fear that Richard would suddenly decide to get married on a whim, and I'd still be stuck here with my crush. Perhaps fate took pity on me, and an opportunity finally came. When I saw the message from Richard, my mind went blank. I panicked at first, but then I slowly realized something wasn't right. Just sneaking that one kiss 6 months ago was enough for me to replay it in my mind every day. If something had really happened with Richard, would remember it until the day I died. Since I could find out which hospital Richard was in and her room number, I could certainly find out what kind of surgery she was having. Since Richard wasn't explaining, I decided to just play along. While I was at it, I brought that cannon fodder Caleb back from abroad to add the final spark. Caleb held up the medical report as if it were some earth-shattering evidence and threw it in front of me. You don't really believe Richard is pregnant with the child of a monster like you, do you? I looked at him like he was an idiot. You fool. I already knew. You think everyone is as stupid as you, unable to tell the difference between an appendix and a uterus? I took 2 little red books out of my drawer and tossed them in front of him. The baby doesn't matter. The fact that she's willing to be with me is enough. Caleb's face twisted in anger, and he completely lost it. I'm going to tell Richard the truth tomorrow. Don't think you're getting away with this. He said that in the morning. By the afternoon, I had him on a plane back out of the country. When Richard walked into my office, I hadn't had time to wipe the smile off my face. Richard asked, "What are you smiling about?" I carefully put our 2 marriage certificates back in the drawer. I was just thinking that the fish I picked out this afternoon would be perfect for making you a spicy boiled fish tonight. Risking it all once, for a lifetime with the one I love. Totally worth it.